Thank you very much for the invite. My name is George Atia. I'm an associate professor in ECE. I also have an affiliation with computer science as a joint appointment. I lead the data science and machine learning lab, and let me tell you a little bit about my work. Okay, so I received my PhD from Boston University in 2009, after which I went for a postdoc for 3 years at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Then I joined UCF in 2012 as an assistant professor, and then I became an associate professor in 2018. I was a visiting faculty fellow at the Air Force Research Lab in 2019 and 2020. These are my primary research areas. I mostly work nowadays on robust and scalable machine learning techniques. I work in the area of statistical signal processing, statistical inference, sequential decision making, and more recently in the area of verifiable AI and explainable AI. I also use information theory a lot in many of my analysis methods and its applications in wireless as well as data science. I've taught graduate courses as well as undergraduate courses at UCF. I've listed them here. Of note, I'm going to teach machine learning and pattern recognition, which is a graduate course next semester here at UCF. Some of the key accomplishments is that I have advised 11 PhD students, 8 of which have graduated. Out of these 8, 3 are now research scientists at Amazon Web Services, the Air Force Research Lab, and Expedia. 2 are tenure track assistant professors, 2 are pursuing postdocs, 1 is in industry. Based on some of the work I'm going to describe to you, we've published more than 150 publications in top journals and conferences. I'm also serving as an associate editor of the transactions on signal processing. My work has been funded by NSF, ONR, DARPA, and the Department of Energy. So let me move to the research directions that I'm pursuing. So I'm pursuing research mainly along 4 main directions. The first one is on data collection, sensing, and acquisition. In that context, we try to come up with algorithms that exploit the underlying signal structure and also respect the underlying sensing constraints. In structured learning, you have data that could exhibit different structures. For example, it could lie on nonlinear manifolds, or it could have a clustering structures, for example, like in a graph, or it could have tensor representations. In the context of supervised learning, you can have a model that you're able to train using certain examples, but you want it to also generalize well on unseen examples. In the context of decision-making, we're trying to come up with policies so that agents would be able to take actions in uncertain environments. And my work is both in developing theory as well as scalable and robust algorithms, and it's driven by many of the limitations and challenges that I tried to list here. I'm going to tell you more about it. I also study the bearing of my research on different applications in computer vision, in security of networks, cyber physical security, structural health monitoring, imaging, optics, brain-computer interfacing, and also dynamic spectrum sharing. So let me tell you about the scalable and robust learning research direction. In this area, my work is mostly motivated by the fact that many of the existing techniques are very sensitive to outliers, or to the fact that a lot of the data is missing. You could have incomplete data. The models that you have learned could be subject to adversarial attacks that change their predictions. You deal with scalability issues in terms of the data size and dimension. You could have non-linearities in the data structures. For example, you could have nonlinear manifold structures that underlie the data. Many of the existing algorithms may have poor phase transitions. For example, in clustering, sometimes you're not able to capture very small cluster sizes, or dynamics in the data, such as having, for example, time-evolving graphs. And my goal in that realm is to develop and also analyze scalable and robust algorithms for learning. And that is for many different applications. I've studied that in the context of clustering, robust PCA, tensor decomposition, detecting changes in the data, sudden changes, learning nonlinear manifolds, being able to identify outliers, post-generation in image processing, selecting representatives from the data, data summarization, community detection, or graph clustering. These are some of the applications that I've looked at. And some of the techniques that we have developed, you end up obtaining super linear speedups. So if you look here, you have super linear speedups over some of the state-of-the-art techniques. Here also in the context of, this is in the context of community detection. In the context of robust PCA, we're able to solve problems maybe with a 5,000-fold speedup in terms of runtime. And Some of the ideas that underlie our ability to achieve such gains are we develop new data sketching techniques that are capable of preserving low-dimensional structures in the data, even in the presence of outliers, by using what is known as descriptive sampling and embedding. We also try to advance convex formulations so that we can learn the underlying structures directly from the sketches as opposed to using the entire data sets without losing anything. We also come up with profiles that can encode complex data relations in manifold structures in the presence of corruptions, of data corruptions. We have developed some geometric approaches. For example, we have some work on using convex formulation, finding directions of novelty in the span of the data relative to which you might be able to cluster the data. We use low-rank representations and come up with new ones. I've used random feature maps for reproducing kernel Hilbert spaces. We're developing also hybrid architectures that are both deep architectures that are both model-based as well data-driven. Some of the impact of my work in this area is that we came up with techniques that achieve more than 1,000-fold speedups, robust strategies that are provable. They have enhanced breakdown points in the sense that you can tolerate a much larger number of outliers that could also be structured. They could exhibit certain structures, or they can come also in different types. We've done this in the online setting, in the centralized settings, came up with algorithms that have enhanced phase transition and provable guarantees. And as I mentioned, we studied that in the context of many applications like the ones listed here. This work has led to many papers at top AI and machine learning venues, such as ICML, AAAI, ISHCAI, and also journals like Transactions on Signal Processing, TKDE, Pattern Recognition. And much of this work was funded by NSF through an NSF Career Award, as well as other NSF grants. And more recently, we've received a medium NSF grant in collaboration with the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign and the University of Buffalo. Another research direction that I also pursue in my research is that of data collection itself, structure and sparsity cognizant data acquisition. In that context, what we try to do is to develop and analyze algorithms that can leverage intrinsic data structures in the data, such as sparsity, periodicity, low dimensionality. And by analyzing, I mean we try to understand the sample and computation complexity and phase transitions. We also want to understand the fundamental limits in terms of recovery and reconstruction. And in doing that, we want to account for existing sensing constraints. For example, you may not be able to change the hardware that you're dealing with. You have to deal with whatever hardware is given to you. You could have finite apertures in your system, limited number of degrees of freedom. And I studied the bearing of these applications, the bearing of these algorithms on different applications, for example, in brain-computer interfacing over here. In imaging, here we're imaging an object that was actually under a collaborative grant with Creole, supported by DARPA, where we try to image objects hidden behind corners by fusing information, different sources of information, as well as interferometry, structural health monitoring. That was collaborative work with Nejati from civil engineering. And my approach in this area has been mostly on coming up with multi-criteria and multi-resolution convex formulations by which you can do information fusion from multiple sources. For example, in this problem, we're trying to fuse information from field intensity as well as spatial coherence of light obtained at different scales. We also exploit the sparsity that is common to many of the signals and leverage signal representations in sparsifying basis. For example, if you look at periodic mixtures, these mixtures are known to admit sparse representations in what is known as nested periodic dictionaries, like Ramanujan periodicity transforms, Fairy dictionaries. So we leverage that to be able to derive exact sparse recovery guarantees and conditions. We try to come up with models that are hardware aware using what is known as linear canonical transforms so that you can improve the quality of reconstruction or recovery. Some of the impacts that we had from this work is that we have analytical characterizations of these algorithms in terms of achievability regions, in terms of provable guarantees. We're able to use the existing sensing constraints, meaning not change our hardware, versus the conventional approaches in which people just try to introduce random ensembles that may not be native to the existing systems. This has been applied in context of the high-speed optical communications, real-time BCI, passive imaging, as I mentioned, which is bridging areas between signal processing, optics, and neural engineering and image processing. In turn, this has led to many interesting publications, collaborative in optics journals, neural journals, signal processing journals, and such. This line of work has been funded by NSF, DARPA, and the Office of Naval Research. The other area that I also want to mention is the area of explainable AI, or verifiable planning and policy synthesis. In this context, my goals is, imagine that you have autonomous agents that are acting in uncertain environments. So one of the goals is that you want to synthesize policies that can satisfy constraint specifications of the behavior of these agents as they act in uncertain environments. For example, safety specifications. We also want to be able to speed up reinforcement learning while achieving superhuman performance. And also these decision-making policies that we come up with, we want to be able to do transfer learning so that it can perform well as we move them across different domains. We've studied that in many contexts, and some of the approaches that I've used are using mathematical programming formulations that are encoding these specifications that we care about on the behavior of agents, even in general multi-chain Markov decision processes. We came up with a new notion of a class of policies that are class preserving and edge preserving, in the sense that they are able to restrict the play in the terminal, strongly connected component of these Markov decision processes, as well as we've been able to speed up learning by using reward shaping mechanisms that are guided by logical representations of these objectives, like in this picture. As you can see, we're able to achieve a lot of speed up in the learning of multiple agents in reducing the number of play steps. In terms of impact of this work, actually, one of the things is that we solved a long-standing open problem in constrained Markov decision multi-chain MDPs. This work was published last year in JAIR, the Journal of AI Research. We developed policies that come with strong provable guarantees. And of course, in turn, when you're able to meet specifications on behavior, you can increase trust in AI solutions. We have fast reinforcement learning algorithms, even if you're operating in an environment in which you're only getting sparse rewards, which is very challenging. This has led to many publications in top AI venues, such as JAIR, ISHCAI, AAAI, and we have also ongoing collaborations with the Air Force Research Lab. In terms of future research directions, I want to continue to leverage low-dimensional models for high-dimensional and massive data analysis. There's still many open problems when it comes to different inference tasks, operating in different distributed settings, the federated learning, dealing with data with other types of structures, coming up with new algorithms and understanding fundamental limits. Another area is that of joint data mining and sensing, in which I'm really interested in the interaction between information dynamics and control data acquisition. So both the learning and the data collection, how the interplay between both of them. Explainable and robust AI. In this area, we want to have hybrid specifications. For example, you can enforce not only steady state specifications, but also specifications encoded in other types of logic, using different logical representations to speed up learning, transfer learning between different domains, which is one of the important areas nowadays, and also studying the bearing of this on multidisciplinary areas that such as security of CPS, computational imaging, smart buildings, and so forth. With this, I conclude. I would like to thank my sponsors, my graduate students, collaborators, without which, of course, all this work wouldn't have been possible. So thank you all.